Welcome to Pods with Posh and Pool, and today we're going to give you an update on where we're at, and also we want to talk to you about resilience, because we feel as though resilience is something we all need in life to get through tough circumstances. So 3 questions: how do you recover from loss? How do you develop resilience? And how do you persevere when life gets tough? Now, Joe, you and I have both, like many others, suffered from some pretty tough circumstances. So what do you think is key to persevering and pushing through?
Oh, okay. I think to begin with, to try not to get too overwhelmed by thinking too far ahead in the future, for starters. So bring yourself back to where we are and in the very moment, because like, for instance, like over the last couple of weeks, I've had quite a lot of bad news from various places, and it's been hugely overwhelming. And sometimes whenever you get all of that dumped on you, you all of a sudden you think, how am I going to cope? How's this going to happen in the future? What's going to be the outcome? Da, 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 da. And all these questions start going around in your head, which are all very, very natural. But they're not really that helpful, because often we can't answer the questions anyway. So what I do now is I accept that that's how I'm feeling, and feelings come up as well. You know, I've been really angry at the world, but my anger lasted a really short period of time because of all the training that we do on ourselves. However, you allow yourself to feel the feelings, for starters. Allow yourself to have that moment, that day, that week, that everything just feels a bit crap. But then you've got to turn the thought patterns around.
So great tip there for listeners, because I think the first thing you said is, if you're looking into the future, then you can so easily partner with fear, because you go down that spiral, don't you? What if this happens? How am I going to cope with this? And so the future holds the fear. But then what you're saying is come back to the present moment and be in the now. And when you're in the now, first of all, come to acceptance. This is what's happened, and actually be in the present moment. So you've had lots of bad news recently, and life is full of conflict and adversity. We think that if we can just get over what we're sitting in right now, the bad news or the suffering or the pain, then the minute we're over it, life is actually going to be okay. And then I can get on with it and I can live life to the full and I'll be happy. Again, we go into the future, don't we? We're coming out of the present. Come back to the present all the time. Be in this moment. And that's not to say we can be happy in the moment necessarily, or find joy in the moment, but it's actually just coming out of the future.
And the biggest thing, and we talk about this all the time, gratitude for me is massive. And since introducing gratitude into my life, it's the one thing that helps me come back to the moment quickly. You know, looking around and see what I do have to be grateful for, because we can get engulfed in the sorrow of life, the traumas of life, the surprises and the turbulation. You know, it's crazy sometimes. However, just to be brought back to the moment, to be thankful for the things that we do have, rather than concentrating on the things that we don't. And that's a real big thing for me.
And it also changes our mindset, doesn't it, when you step into gratitude, because it's so easy to sit in a negative pattern of behavior where we look at the things that are wrong, we look at the things that are difficult in our life, but change it around and to be grateful for things means we develop a much more positive mindset. It's interesting because we've got a book that's coming out soon. It's going off to the publishers, isn't it? And one of the chapters is on resilience, and in there's a little tool on looking at gratitude and how you can ask questions in your present situation. You can ask the how questions and the what questions. What can I do to empower myself right now so I feel better? What choices do I have, again, so that I'm empowered? And ask those questions. How did I overcome last time I felt really low and I was sitting in bed and didn't want to get out of bed, or I felt depressed? How did I get myself out of that situation? What techniques do other people use when they're suffering? For example, YouTube clips or movies we've seen. What tools did they use to overcome difficult life challenges? And I think the what and the how questions are really good, that we can give ourselves in the present moment, whether it's through the loss of a relationship, whether it's health issues, whether it's loss of a job, whether it's isolation in lockdown. How can I empower myself? What choices do I have? Because then we feel as though we've got choice and we feel empowered in that situation.
And that ties in with your very first question that you asked earlier on about how do we get over loss, or how do we face loss? It's exactly the same. I mean, these three questions obviously are really closely tied in. But when we do face loss of something, it is trauma based, you know, brings out all of this sadness. However, it's like, what's the lessons here? What can I do now? What can I do for myself to move forward? Or what can I do for others? Sometimes it's not just about ourselves. It's about, you know, it could be your family unit, it could be people in work, whatever, but what can I do now to make steps? But equally, when we do lose something, allow yourself to feel that grief, because often we push the grief under the carpet kind of thing. We hold it down because it's too painful. But there comes a time, hold on, I've just had children return home. I just yelled shut up at them, but I pressed mute at the same time.
I think you yelled, lovely to see you, have some lunch on the table.
Yeah, I went, I'm recording, shut up. Yeah, no, but you know, the grief that is there around any kind of loss, whether that be a loss of a loved one, a loss of a relationship, a loss of a job, it's very, very confronting again. So be really, really kind to yourself, because often we can be our own worst enemies, can't we? And we put too much pressure on ourselves and things, but just be really kind to yourself as well. Have self-compassion. It's such an important thing. You put your hand on your own heart and have self-compassion.
I think that's so important, Jo, because you can't avoid grief, and it comes back into the book again. We're talking about how to deal with where we're at, and the first stage is awareness, but we can't run away. And we talk about different ways in the book that we can run away. We can have an eating addiction, or we can avoid food, or we can keep ourselves really busy, or we can turn to alcohol, or we can turn to sex and relationships to numb the pain. But actually, instead of doing those things, if we're aware of how we're running away, then we can actually change and actually be in that present moment. And grief is painful, it's raw, it's bleak, it's black. There's no escaping it. And that happens many times in our lives because we live in adversity and conflict and suffering and pain. But you're so right about being in the grief. And when you're in the grief, we say again and again, don't be Jo, just be really kind. And as you say, be really gentle with yourself. So take time out. You can take a few days off work. If you can run nice hot baths for yourself and sit with candles, if you can go into nature, if you can do a bit of exercise. Jo, you're a big advocate for exercise. And just slightly change your routine of each day. And as you wake in the morning, just say, today I'm actually going to be really kind to myself. I love the poet Rumi. He is a 13th century Persian poet. And I'm just going to read out a few quotes for him, which is when to find blessings in your pain. So he says, what hurts you blesses you. Darkness is your candle. Where there is ruin, there is hope for a treasure. These pains you feel are messengers. Listen to them. So again, it's about staying in it, staying in the present moment. Suffering is a gift. Might not feel like it though, and it doesn't when you're in it. In it is hidden mercy. And this one here, which I love, but it's also really hard. You have to keep breaking your heart until it opens. That's quite a big one, isn't it? How many times do our hearts get broken and then our hearts soften and we address pain in such a different way?
Absolutely. And to know that, I mean, you and I have been on a journey of self-discovery for a long, long time. You know, I talk about being open about it. You know, I've been reading self-help books since I was a teenager. Did any of it sink in? I knew it intelligently, but it didn't, you know, it's okay to know something intelligent, but not at a cellular level. So when I eventually did find this place of self-love, it's not a place which is there, it's a continuous journey all the time. And as these things are, you know, gratitude, have self-compassion, they're all a journey, and sometimes we fall off the bandwagon. So for instance, you're talking about exercise, eating healthy, doing all the right things, not to turn into addiction, and them things can be the addiction as well, can't they? But this week has been a really hard week for me, and I found a couple of days I was overeating. I was eating all the wrong things. I wasn't getting the carrot sticks. I was eating a bag of chocolates or some cake or this or that. But you know what? It made me feel even more wretched. At the time, it feels like it's an okay thing to do. But the more we know ourselves and the more we can treat ourselves with respect and honour, we realise that those things are not the things that are going to help us through. You know, they're easy things to turn to, And even in all our knowledge, we still fall off the bandwagon from time to time. We just don't stay there as long as what we used to. You know, I am not in a constant state of either undereating or overeating. I treat myself kindly. However, just the odd day it happens, but our brains are programmed to coming back to self-compassion, coming back to self-honor, coming back to self-worship even.
And yet it's practice, practice, practice. Because I think a really good exercise is, for many people, it's very normal to go and open the fridge or to open the food cupboard and grab a snack bar. When you have that feeling come in of anxiety or overwhelm or something's happened, you just go straight to the fridge or to the cupboard. So a simple technique for that, if that's what you don't want to do, is actually when you go and you've got your hand on the fridge door or on the cupboard, just say, in 5 minutes, when I've actually eaten this bar, how will I feel? Will I still need to go and get another one? And am I going to eat 2 or 3? Could I actually, at this very moment in time, while you've still got your hand on the fridge, go for a walk, go outside, go and do a bit of exercise, call a friend and change that habit and break the habit? Because it is habit, it's habitual, isn't it? As human beings, we're habitual creatures. The other thing to do is, if there's no food in the cupboard or the fridge to eat that's unhealthy, you can't eat it. So the key is to walk around the supermarket, and when you're about to put it into your trolley, say, I've got 6 chocolate buns there. I'm the one that's going to eat those 6 chocolate buns. So shall I buy 6 apples instead? Because actually it's not in the cupboard, you can't eat it. So the difficulty is actually, and the struggle is when you put it into the supermarket trolley. It's not when you get it out the cupboard. So if you want to break that habit, a really good thing to do, because I used to do this when I was in severe trauma for my marriage breakup, was I would walk around Tesco's in England and say, I'm really aware if I put that in my trolley, it's not going to be that the children have 4 and I have 2. It's going to be I eat all 6. Do I want to do that? No. Or yes, I do. We've got choice. Again, it comes down to choice. It's practice, practice, practice. It's not something we can do straight away, but if you're aware that that's what you're doing, you can change your habit in the supermarket, or the minute you go to the fridge door, you can be aware of the feelings and say, these are the feelings I've got. They're inadequacy, loneliness, rejection, and then where do they come from? And actually, again, sit and work with them. When people say stay in the pain, kind of don't know what it means, but it means in those moments, why am I feeling this way? Is there a root of it that might come from childhood? What can I do with it to turn it around? And again, practice.
Absolutely. What was the other question you had, Sue? What was the middle question? Because I think we've addressed question 3 in 1. What was the middle question?
How do you develop resilience?
Oh, well.
That's in our book as well. I like that chapter in our book.
Absolutely. And, you know, some people are born more resilient than others, but absolutely, it's definitely something we can learn and work on. And again, it's being in those moments and finding the techniques that work for you, and everything we've just talked about. You know, we don't become resilient just by living an easy life. Absolutely not. And thinking to yourself, you know, when life does become tough, say to yourself, I've survived every day up until now. I have survived each and every day, and there has been tough moments within my life. So how have I survived? You know, like a child, when they learn to walk, they don't fall over and go, well, it was hard, I'm just going to stay on the floor, then I'm just going to bum shuffle for the rest of my life. They get back up and they take another few steps and they fall over. Then they get back up because they are so determined that they want freedom, that they want to be able to get around as much as the big people. And that's what resilience is about. It's about, do you want to survive? Do you want to keep going? Do you want to keep learning? Do you want to live your very best life? Do it for you.
Beautiful. I love that. Absolutely. Do it for you. And in that doing it for you, can you set yourself a strategy to do something for you that you haven't done before? So if you're facing a relationship breakup right now and you've got time on your hands and you're sitting thinking about him or her and you're missing them, you could actually fill that time with a new strategy or plan. You could say, I'm going to get up half an hour earlier. I'm going to do a half-hour walk or run. By the end of the month, I am going to have beaten my personal best. I'm going to download an app which I can measure myself against myself, not against anybody else. And by the end of the month, I will be achieving this. And the end of 3 months, I will look like this and feel like this. And actually then you're filling your time and you're focusing on your own strategy. And therefore you're not sitting in that loss the whole time. So set yourself a target, put a strategy into place, Jo's got an extraordinary strategy. I'm not Jo, and I'm sure there's a few out of you that are, but I'm not. And she has set herself a target to do another ultra marathon. Last year you did 75k. I daren't mention what you're doing this year, but it has got the numbers 100 in it. In that order. In that order. My order would be 001. Your order is 100. So we've recently re-released an interview we did with Jo after her last 75k run, which was actually in mountainous terrain. It was really horrible. It wasn't her, it wasn't me even thinking about it. But have a look on our Pods with Posh and Pool page and you'll see that interview. And again, it's about resilience. How do you step outside your comfort zone to do those things that you fear you can't do? And Jo did it very well. So Jo, how do you even envisage beginning to comprehend in your mind running 100k?
One step at a time. It's as simple as that. One step at a time. Because, you know, this relates back to any goal we have in life. If you've got a massive, massive goal and it seems too big, chunk it down into the bite-sized chunks to get there to that goal. Because sometimes, and again, overcoming adversity is one of them. You know, if you are in a really dark, bleak place, it may seem a really long way to get to that light. Do it in bite-sized chunks. Get out of bed in the morning, pat yourself on the back. Brush your teeth in the morning. Yes, I've done that. Get yourself dressed. Put a nice outfit on rather than your tracky dacks or your pajamas. Little baby steps get you to where you want to be. And it's as simple as that. And when, I'm going to go and attempt to run 100 kilometers. And I say run very loosely. I may well be crawling, crying and walking backwards at some stage, but whatever. I plan to cover the distance. But it's one step at a time, and have something in your head that's bigger than you. Like, you know, I talk about my sister. We did a lovely podcast with my sister last year because she was facing a cancer diagnosis and fighting cancer. Well, she's doing it again. So every step will be for her, because if she can fight that, I can put one foot in front of the other. Again, with any adversity she's facing now. Yeah, I've had horrible news this week, but I will get out of bed and I will put my clothes on and I will go and face the world. It's exactly the same. It comes back to exactly the same forms of resilience.
And that comes back to courage. How courageous is that you step outside your pain and you think of somebody else in the situation and say, I'm going to do it for somebody else. And that's another way we can actually transform our life, isn't it? Transition out of our own pain, to think of somebody else and do it for them and stretch yourself beyond your limit. In those moments, Jo, when you are running 100k, obviously it's not straightforward. It's not just a steady route the whole way. I mean, there's mountainous terrain and there's peaks and there's troughs, but psychologically there's peaks and troughs as well, isn't there? When you hit one of those troughs, obviously you're going to come out of it, but how do you deal with it when you're in it?
I do a lot of self-talk. Self-talk is one of the biggest things that get me through life. It's one of the biggest things that got me into a place of self-love, by talking gentle, kind words over my life and being kind to myself, even when I didn't believe it. That was how I have got to where I am. When I get into a place of despair now, again, I go back to gentle, kind, loving words to myself. Same when I'm in a dark place. I'm like, okay, where can we go from here? The only way is up. I'm at rock bottom now. I can't go any further. I'm going up. And it's just being kind to yourself the whole way through. You can do it. And also positive self-affirmations. You can do it, Joanne. You've got grit. You've got determination. You can do it. You can do it. And it's constant. Sometimes you have to speak to yourself for like maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes. But you almost get into like a meditative mantra and you're just talking away to yourself. Sometimes I do come across a little bit crazy because I realise the words are coming out and they're not just in my head. But that's okay as well. I've come to a place of peace about things like that. But it's the words we use in life are so important. Please don't underestimate the power of words ever.
Do you know a tool I found really helpful when I was at my lowest, when I'd had my 3 young children abducted and I was pregnant with my 4th and I knew I was going to lose her as well, and the courts had said you'll never see your children again. I actually put on music and I danced around the room, and I remember the euphoric sense of hope that came through music because it drowned out the silence that was in my house. I was in the house with empty cots that I knew would never be filled with my children ever again. And the sound of music And the feeling of dancing through the pain was so euphoric for me. It kept me going. And I remember dancing and putting the music on so loudly that almost drowned out my own thoughts of just complete hopelessness. There was no hope. I was never going to see my 4 children, tiny children. They were all under 5. But I remember at the time then, when the music would sort of die down and stop, I could then speak positive words over my life. There is hope. I'm going to fight on. It was almost like the music gave me the power to do it. And it transitioned my thoughts from the silence and the stillness of loneliness into, there's a greater power out there. I don't know the consequence. I don't know the outcome. I can't control it. But I do know I've got choice. I do know I'm going to fight. I do know I'm never going to give up. And I do know that no matter what anybody else says, I'm going to stand against those words, and I'm going to change them around in my head. When somebody says you'll never see your children again, I will speak, I will see my children again. And it's the same in relationships. When somebody said the relationship's over, I don't love you, you can turn it around and say, well, that's so sad, but I love myself. I know the value of me and how sad it is that that person can't see it. And I'm going to find a greater power and purpose for me. And I'm going to rise up stronger because they can't see it in me. And I'm going to see greater value in myself. What do we use? There's so many different techniques we can use.
Absolutely. But movement, noise, music is some of the best forms of therapy. Absolutely. You know, or even go and plunge yourself into the cold sea, you know, get all of those endorphins going, get them like, it's like healing properties in the water, or go and take a bath, or go and have a shower. Move your body in some way. It's so powerful. Like, I can't even begin to stress. I mean, you've been in one of the worst traumas you can be in, having your children removed from you, you know, abducted. But I lived in depression for many, many years after certain sufferings that I went through. And it is such a dark place. And it's so easy to become engulfed by them feelings. However, it's almost like digging yourself out of a really dark, shallow grave in a way, isn't it? And you start to come up and you see the light, you move bit by bit, move the soil or whatever. But by doing things, by moving, it's such a, you know, our bodies are made to move. We are not made to sit still. We've got all of these amazing muscles, that are all of these systems within our bodies. We are walking miracles. So the power of movement and the power of music as well can never, ever be underestimated. It's so awesome. Like, if I didn't move my body every day, I would definitely be depressed. There's no 2 ways about it.
And you do that so well. And as you say, we're actually 3 parts, aren't we? We're mind, body, and spirit. We're not just mind and body thinking about it. And if we move our bodies, then it empowers our mind and our spirit. And you talk about being in the grave and just seeing a tiny bit of light. I actually remember, Jo, when I felt I was in a black hole and there was no light. I remember saying, you know, people say, find the hope. There was no hope. I was told I would never see my children again. Where's the hope? There was no hope. It was black. Now, that's not to underestimate any other form of suffering, and I'm not saying at all by any means that my suffering was worse or different from anybody else's. Suffering is suffering, and although the circumstances are different, we've interviewed so many people on our podcast, haven't we, who've lost legs, lost their limbs, lost everything in their life they could ever imagine, lost all hope. The stories are very different, but the messages are the same. We need resilience, we need courage, we need to live in gratitude, change our thoughts to change our circumstances. And every single story is so beautiful about overcoming adversity. And we've got some amazing talks coming up. For those of you who don't know, we've recently launched manPODS and teenPODS, and the message is the same for men and for teenagers. How do we overcome adversity and suffering? How do we develop resilience, courage, gratitude? In manPODS, Mark is a fantastic one to listen to, isn't he? He had a surf accident and lost the use of his arms and legs. teenPODS, we've got Owen coming up, who is speaking. His story is incredible. His life story about how his girlfriend ran off with his best friend and how his life went into a very quick downward spiral. It was black, it was bleak, and he went into addiction and violence, how he came out of that to empower himself. Quatran, who lost 2 legs in a car accident. Ellie, who lost both parents within 3 years of each other when she was a teenager. Jack at university, who couldn't find his way, not knowing he was doing the right course. We have some new recordings coming out with teenPODS, body image, finding self-love, and what about teenagers posting naked selfies? Is that okay? We've got some incredible podcasts, so do please pop onto our Facebook page, Pods with Posh and Pool. hop on to any of the podcast apps, Spotify, iTunes, iHeart Radio, Soundcloud, and so on. Like our page. We've also got an amazing freemium, a freebie that we're giving out. Jo, do you want to tell our listeners what that's about?
It's a 7-day beginner's guide to self-love, because I think there are so many people out there, and we were them people once upon a time who had no appreciation of ourselves, didn't know how to practice self-care, you know, we're just actually our own worst enemies. We were like hanging around with the playground bully, but it was in our own head. And it's just a beautiful, simple guide to 7 days on your first pathway to self-love. And it's beautiful. It looks fantastic. And we highly recommend it. And you can just use it for as long as you want as well, not just 7 days. They're just the stepping stones, but they're the stepping stones that we still use now, the practices that we use, because we walk the walk and we talk the talk.
And it's beautiful. So cut it out, stick it up, print it out, stick it on your wall, have it so that you can see it daily. And we will attach below this talk the link so that you can click on that and download that for yourself. But also, please, we are so about mental health. We want to reduce the depression rates. We want to face anxiety. We want to reduce suicidal ideation. So many people out there are suffering mental health issues, whether it just be loss from a relationship, whatever it is. We don't know who those people are. You don't know. Often people suffer in silence. We don't put our hand up and shout and say, I'm having a really hard time. You go to the supermarket, somebody says, how are you? You say, great, thank you. We don't know who's suffering. So please do share this talk, share the freemium, share the podcast page so we can get the message out there and we can impact mental health.
Absolutely. And the reason why we do it is because both Sue and I have been in a dark hole where we faced suicide as our only option, or that's at least what we thought at the time. And thankfully, we never took that option. And I think a lot of people who do take the option really don't want it to be their only option either. And if we can help people find that place of self-love, if we can help people, give them the tools, the strategies of life, we really want to reduce those statistics. And we, as I say, we want to increase mental health. You know, we want to live happier, healthier lives, absolutely. And it's such a passion of ours. You know, we love all our teenagers in our life. We love all the people around us. And we will continue to fight this fight for as long as is necessary.
Absolutely. So huge thank you to all our incredible guests that have come onto our podcast. And to you, our listeners, we send love, light and peace. Don't forget to click below and download your free 7-day guide to finding self-love.